Fox and Friends has been quietly ramping up their critique of Donald Trump, honestly, within the context of the derailment in East Palestine. Let's take a listen because this is, shockingly critical of the former president, their guy, and they know he's watching. He likes, well, maybe not as much anymore because they're rhinos.
Well,
but this used to be his
but
favorite show.
This feels like, is it Ducey DeSantis? But
here we go.
Working class area will live paycheck to paycheck. They don't have money to go stay in a Four Seasons.
Plus, they go there to get answers, and the company doesn't show up, Norfolk Southern, because they're scared. They said that they're worried about their safety. Right. And then the people are asking questions. They're screaming out questions. If you watch the full video when they're sitting here in the high school auditorium or gymnasium, and Bill Johnson, the congressman, he said, look, the White House is not here. If you have a question, write it down. Here's my card. Send it to me, and all the questions will be answered. I will contact the White House.
Right. Speaking of the White House, apparently regulations regarding train safety were changed during the Trump administration. This particular railroad and others lobbied President Trump to dismantle an Obama-era rule that would have required railroads to update their braking systems. And apparently the Obama administration had pushed for it to govern transportation of hazardous materials after about 500,000 barrels of crude were dumped. But ultimately, the Trump administration undid that and said the costs exceeded the benefits. Nobody understands. And, when they
That's just, well, I mean, Ducey, he's the most anti-Trump of those guys. Yeah. And there's this constant, unspoken tension, particularly between him and Kilmeade, who seethes whenever Ducey really speaks. We had the B-roll, so we couldn't see him like white knuckling it over there. But I mean, like, what do you make of that? I mean, I think Republicans are getting panicked at how much Trump seems to be already running away with this thing as of now. And DeSantis is doing his crime tour of, DeSantis is doing crime tours of Philly and Chicago and New York, and Trump's in East Palestine. I mean, where that just illustrates how much more connected he is to the beating heart of the Republican base than culture war DeSantis, Meatball Ron.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like Ron is running for president of the comment section or something. Ron is going for what he sees as the red meat that the base eats up, and it's like crime in blue cities. Which, for a portion of the audience, they love that shit. Yeah. But Trump is knows what's actually going to get him on TV, right? Because he is not, obviously he's, very much a creature of the internet, but because he is primarily a monster created by television, he has a much clearer sense of this will get me on TV, and it's going to be, I'm going to East Palestine, before going to, I don't know, where Ron was in Staten Island or something, being yeah. And it's, no one, I mean, you're just not going to get outside the sort of right-wing internet bubble with that stuff compared to actually getting the networks to pay attention, which is for Trump, that still matters. And TV is still where his base lives.
Yeah, and just going to not to make too much of this, but it just is, I think, is so illustrative. Going to a McDonald's and being like, I'm buying, it's on me, it's on me. And Ron's at the Chicago Fraternity of Police, at the police union, speaking to 100 cops.
139 people.
Yeah. I mean, he's really, that's just bad politics. He's got... his barometer's off.
Right. I know. I think it is. I think it has. And that's been my take on Ron for a while. And, obviously I could end up proven wrong here, but he's been playing on easy mode in Florida in the sense that he has just in addition to the incredible amount of power he has in government, he's just been playing purely for the right-wing press for so long. that the not to paint Trump as someone who was like crossing the divide or whatever, but Trump knew to like play for the cheap seats, and Ron, his only experience is like in getting the right wing press to applaud him, right? But he just hasn't had to like appeal to anyone outside of that. And say what you will about Trump, but like as divisive as he was, he actually worked to get people to like him, and just in his insane way.
Yeah, I mean, what do you make of their the conservative media and Republicans trying to make what's happening in East Palestine about anti-white racism? It seems like kind of like it's an updated version of, liberals are talking down to you and they're coastal and they treat you like it's flyover country. And frankly, Biden not showing up there doesn't help that at all. Is there any there?
Well, it follows this pattern of stuff that would have been sort of coded and implied before. Like it's well-worn territory for conservative messaging, but like so much else, it's just so much more explicit in a way that is often kind of frightening now. So I think that like, whereas before it would have been this sort of, and you still see a lot of them basically using this language, but it would have been before like, Biden doesn't care about real Americans. Biden doesn't care about the heartland. Democrats, don't care about, middle America. And they're by making it sort of much more explicitly racial, it's following this sort of very disturbing pattern in all of conservative politics by just explicitly making it like Biden, is against white Americans. So I don't know. In that sense, I think it just represents this ratcheting up of the rhetoric over the last, dozen years or so. But at the same time, like, I'm not sure, again, how much appeal that messaging has. I think it's an easy thing to sort of hit Biden over, but, I don't know how compelling that message really is, right? I mean, I think it's a bit of a... it works easier on some people than it does for all of his faults. It's harder to make that stick to Scranton Joe Biden. Just
right.
Always has been harder to make that stick to him.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what's so fascinating about his approval ratings being relatively low. Although I know they've hit new highs recently. He's up at like 49%. But it doesn't. His people are ambivalent about him. And for the first time in American politics, it's just like not necessarily a bad thing for the Democrats, because it's just, I think there is this nationwide desire outside of the Republican base for some sense of calm and normalcy after those years. And that has carried this guy a long way. Plus the fact that he's just old, white, boring Joe, and none of the standard Republican attacks of he's a secret Muslim or he's a shrill bitch for Hillary, who's also really corrupt. That doesn't stick that much. No,
and that's been, and it is funny that I think you can make the case that a lot of Biden's middling approval is due in part to a lot of people who voted for him not being in love with him, right? And there are worse problems to have. Mm-hmm. But like as you say, I think there's been this story since the 2020 election of conservatives being just driven bonkers by the fact that they can't get those kind of attacks to stick. And like, what is Hunter's laptop if not a sort of like extended complaint that that it didn't work in 2020 and it should have worked, like,
yeah, right.
The reason they are sticking with it to this day is they're like, it's not fair that whatever this was didn't work.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and it's just so funny that it's a much more, paper thin and silly version of Hillary's complaint, but they're just applying it to the laptop. I mean, about Russia. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which they mocked endlessly.